Hello and welcome to this episode of In Lay Terms. I'm your host, Payman Ascari, and we have with us a fellow PPC candidate, Mr. Stephen Makk. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm just finished speaking at a local event and finding it easier and easier as the years go by to connect with different people. I'm the candidate in Simcoe North. That's in central Ontario on the beautiful shores of Georgian Bay, Lake Simcoe, and I've run as a candidate twice before. 2019, my first time ever doing anything political, and then 2021, I started out, I got I think 1.8%, and second time around I got 7.8 and had 80 volunteers and 2 offices and hundreds of signs. It seems to me PPC is a growth industry. I see myself as an old-timer, a literal graybeard. In local politics, I'm sort of the guy, in all candidates events that's been around, that has been in a rodeo, has been a clown in a rodeo for the longest. And I describe myself, well, I'm also the regional coordinator for Central Ontario. So most of my contribution to the PPC is behind the scenes. I help establish regional associations. I spent a lot of time in July and August interviewing new candidates, which I love doing. I love meeting people and exchanging ideas with them and helping make sure that the quality of candidates is high, and it's almost a little difficult because I'm very optimistic about the future of the PPC because I can see what's going on inside, and I know that the future is good for us. But that's I guess that's an introduction. I love talking about ideas. I'm an ideas guy. I love to learn from people, and I sometimes joke that I'm sort of I've always been a libertarian thinker, although there's many conservative values that I hold, but also I joke that I'm the most left-wing person in the PPC. What's funny, I did a psychology test once, and it was I forget where it was. It's about through your lifestyle and life choices and interests, it tries to predict who you are. So the last question, where would you rather go, a hockey game or a symphony concert, or what books do you read, or in your spare time do you like to go in nature or hang out in a bar, or the questions either or things, and it comes back and tells me you're hard left, and I go, whoa, this is crazy. I'll try this again. Boom, again and again. But when I do a political compass, I'm in the bottom half, very much in the bottom right quadrant. I'm a little inboard and down from Milton Friedman. So what I sometimes like to say is that if you believe in yourself and you believe in civil rights and you honestly believe that others have rights too, including the people you don't like, if you believe in those things, I can be your friend, and I think you can be my friend, and I think we can work together to get a lot done, and we can work together to make Canada the best that it can be. And guess what? That does not require a huge government that sprawls all over the place. Now, that kind of thinking is alien to authoritarians and to modern, I wouldn't even say just modern leftists, but a lot of people are just so, I don't like the word brainwashed, but they're so comfortable thinking that the way things are and have been developing over the last 60 years is sort of the normal thing or the only way. And I like to explore ways that are different. Some of that is to revisit the proven effective institutions from the past, the long-term ones, like our Constitution, for example. Don't tear it up. You're not going to change. You can always improve it. Absolutely. There's goofy things in there. So much ink spilled on specific language rights for New Brunswickers. Like, okay, we know people made compromises in the past. Leave sleeping dogs lie. But then I noticed it doesn't have property rights, and at all. They've talked about putting them in, and it's an interesting story about why they weren't there. But I go, you know what? Rights are about how you live. And a phrase I learned from my friend David Haskell was, freedom's like a muscle. If you don't exercise it, it withers away. And whether we're under a constitutional regime or common law, you have to get out there. You have to defend yourself, your property, and libertarians will say, look, your property is an extension of your body. And that's a wacky thought to mainstream people, but the idea is you sacrifice your limited time on earth, you sacrifice your sweat and toil to obtain things that ensure your survival. How dare anyone take away the tools of your own survival? So rights are really important because that gives people the freedom to be an agent in the world. And governments are putting a wet blanket over all of this. I'm rambling, I know, but these are the things I like to talk about. And sometimes that's not exactly what, say, if I go visit a freedom group, they want to hear. They want to chant about Trudeau sucks, or these exhortations for him, for people to do something to him that starts with the letter F. And that one always makes me laugh. You know why? Despite all the chanting and protesting, I have a feeling that nobody's actually doing that. His wife left him. Poor fella. Nobody's listening to the flags.
He's probably watching this right now. He's going to sick the hate speech police on us.
Hey, well, let's not get started about Bill C-63 because I'm having a good morning and I don't want to get into a bad mood. But I would love to sit down with Justin Trudeau and have a beer with him and hear what he has to say. Because, people ask me, oh, do you hate Trudeau? Or describe Trudeau in one word. And then you see people say psychopath, fascist, communist. Look, man, they call him everything, which basically means I don't like him. And I go underachiever. I'll leave it at that. This leads to what I think is a fundamental problem that we have is this obsession with leaders. And I go, these guys, Trudeau, Poilievre, they're hood ornaments. They're kind of a hood ornament and lightning rod. They're there for you to point at. They're there. They're in some ways the shiny toy that attracts, but also the thing you aim your anger at. And when you do that, be very, very careful that you're not missing what really is wrong. I'm voting for Trudeau. And I go, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know you lived in Papineau. Because when you go out and vote, you're not voting for Trudeau. You're not voting for Poilievre. You're voting, well, if you live in Simcoe North, I hope you vote for me, because I'm the best guy to represent your views in Ottawa. And Max is a guy I greatly admire, and he's the leader of my party, and he's the right guy for the job. But you know what? If I'm elected MP, Max can't tell me what to do. Because an MP is supposed to be a representative of the people in their territory, and they go to Ottawa to represent. That's more telling the party leader, hey, this is what we need to do, because I talk to my people. And guess what? When I'm MP, I'm going to listen to the NDP supporters. I'm going to listen to the Green supporters, Liberals, Conservatives. Because when you're elected, you take there's a PPC logo back there. You take that down. You put on that little badge that's got, I don't know what logo and symbol, and you're you're I guess technically some kind of, well, you're representative of people. And yes, you have your views, but you have to think about what everyone wants. And again, the direction of control should be from the people to the government. That has been lost a long time ago. We're hearing the government telling the people what to do. Like, think of the pandemic, how destructive that was. And I'm not talking just destructive to people, ruining their lives, ruining their livelihoods. My heart bleeds for small business people who have lost their life savings and their dreams, all over fear. And, what saw me during the pandemics was a scary thing. I knew the politicians would be annoying, but I saw people being annoying in my neighborhood and on the street. Scolds, finger waggers, moral superiority turning into scolding. And, one phrase I say is fear turns weak people into assholes. Pardon my profanity. And this shows that something's gone wrong. And what the worst thing I saw during the pandemic was it broke the webs of trust within communities. You may think they're ephemeral, but when you go to your local barber or hairdresser, those guys are shut down. Yet the big stores, the Walmarts, the Costco's, the large places, they stayed open. Oh yeah, with masses of people just mingling. Okay, if you're going to be epidemiological about it, yeah, that's concerning. But if you have an organization, a small establishment has a schedule, it has a list of who's coming. They have that anyway, by the way. It's not because COVID. And 1 or 2 people at a time, way safer. But what was the problem? It's hard to regulate. There's too many of them. And if you're an authoritarian and you want top-down centralized control in a Stalinistic style, that's terrifying. But to me, it's reassuring. Because you know what? If you really think about your community where you live, the people you really deal with. If the government just disappeared all of a sudden, how long before you notice in your normal life? Unless you're a civil servant, of course. There you're going to have to find a real job. But these are the webs of trust that are invisible. Because when society is working well, everyone's comfortable. And that, in some ways, is how it used to be. People lived in villages. They lived, worked, played in the same place. They may have gone several generations in the same place, and it was okay. But a lot of it has been annihilated. We're alienated. Why? A lot of it is due to top-down control by government in cahoots with media. And they're starting to, not directly, but they're starting to control how people think. Now, I'm not so sure it's the diabolical centralized plan that many people say it is. I think it's an emergent property of a world where communication technology has outstripped our ability to evolve and adapt culturally. Add to that the nihilistic belief that Canada has no culture, the belief that anything goes.
Can I pick up on that?
Yeah, sure.
I was talking to another guest. I believe it was 1971 or 74. There was a commission, the Bilingual and Bicultural Commission, and it's in the title. But at the time, Canada was a bicultural society. You had Anglo and Franco, and then the Ukrainians got involved and they complained, and they switched over to this multicultural view. And multiculturalism basically means you don't have a culture, but. What is your view? I believe Canada does have a culture, but what's your view on Canada's culture?
I love Canada, and I'm born here. My parents are refugees from Eastern Europe. They fled terrible 20th century authoritarian ideas, both Soviet communism and German fascism. And they came to Canada, and Canada, interestingly enough, well, they were kind of picked. I mean, displaced people in Europe, the Canadian government was, I guess, hunting for people, and they, I guess they met the requirements and ended up here. And, well, they probably never thought about they probably didn't even know what the word multiculturalism was, or what, it probably didn't even exist then. And no, I don't blame the Ukrainians for multiculturalism. I blame the Laurentian elite, or the Laurentian consensus, and it was kind of a fashionable idea. To me, multiculturalism, when we use that term politically, means the active engagement by our government to encourage and fund the development of cultures other than the, I would suppose, founding cultures, where I personally always get a little miffed when they say British French, because I think Indigenous people, due to just sheer number of years here and their uniqueness, deserve mention, and they've been treated unfairly. So I always want to mention that these people are not to be forgotten. They're 5%, almost 5% of our citizenry. But multiculturalism, to me, is, I'm firmly against the government policy of multiculturalism. I don't think a single tax dollar should be spent funding somebody's folk dancing festival. Now, that said, I love ethnic events. I love the fact that in Toronto, Toronto is, say, one of the culinary capitals of the world. Man, in Toronto, you can't run a crappy restaurant because you're going to be competed to oblivion. And I love a diverse, multi-ethnic place. But here's the thing, the way I see it. Multiculturalism is not an input. It's an output. And what I mean by that is when you have a free, democratic, open society where people can enjoy freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom to have the cultural fun and raise their children the way they want to raise their kids, what's the result? The result is a happy multicultural situation. It does not need to be pushed. If you build an open, free society, you will get a lot of diverse behavior within a framework of mutual respect. Now, that's the one that we're forgetting. We're letting people into Canada that don't share, I'll say Canadian values, but what I'm going to say, they don't share the values of heterodoxy. And that means if you want to come to Canada, you're welcome to come in, but you got to behave nice to the other people. I mean, libertarianism, I find it often seems like esoteric and intellectual, but you know what, it's kindergarten stuff, really. What they teach you in kindergarten. Don't hit the other kids. Don't take their stuff. Don't hog the toy. Let everyone have their chance to talk, and don't make fun of people over things that aren't important, like, okay, that kid's short, or that guy's got glasses. Like, no, that's not, don't be mean, right? And if people follow those things, and all the great cultures have some version, have some version of the golden rule, hey, come on in. And I can think of so many immigrant success stories all over Canada. Yeah, when you say we're a nation of immigrants, that's not wrong, it's true. And yes, we have inherited, this is where I'm a conservative, we have inherited the wonderful British Enlightenment values of our parliamentary system, which I think is, parts of it are really good. Parts of it, Senate, maybe not, but still, the idea of a parliament, that I'm even comfortable. I like the fact that we don't have a president. I wish our prime ministers were way less powerful. We could work on that. But, I mean, I don't think we should spend, like I said, any money pushing something and funding something. Well, how do you stop it, right? You end up creating this huge Jenga tower of programs and subsidies, and don't get me started, but multiculturalism is another example of how the government blob that ate civil society continues to feed and grow, and we got to kill this monster. And that's what I'm here to do. And you know what? When we have mass immigration, which is terrible, I hate it. 2019, we were out there saying, end mass immigration, it's going to wreck the country. What were we called? Racists, xenophobes, fascists, white supremacists, all kinds of stupid things. And now guess what? PPC is the only party that represents majority view of Canadians. Wow, we're the party of I told you so. And you know what? It's because we have the guts to stand in public and talk about our values and get tomatoes and rocks thrown at us is how we're moving the needle. And you know what? Over time, remember the pandemic? CERB and CEWS, we were running around, I was running around Makk. We're running up a deficit. We're printing money. Yeah, quantitative easing, it's printing money. And boy, when this party's over, the hangover's going to suck. And housing prices are going to go through the roof. We predicted it. We were right. And I think people are slowly coming around to this, that, yeah, we're not famous. I go door to door and I still see people, PPC, what's that? We got to do better. But I tell you, give me some time with any kind of Canadian, and I can, if I can't get them to become a supporter or a voter, I can at least convince them that the crap they see online in some dank corners and see in mass media is not useful. It's misdefining. I tell people, come to a PPC event. Just hang out with the people. You'll feel like you're with family. So anyway, I'm rambling again, but multiculturalism, not the government's business. How about that? And we have founding cultures. We've benefited from them. The British traditions of rule of law, Enlightenment thinking, documented rights. That's all good. French culture, I consider Quebec a treasure for all Canadians because, wow, it's a beautiful thing. I love going over there. I love practicing French. I'm never offended by hearing French on the street. I have Francophone towns in my writing, by the way, and I have a lot of friends who help me communicate there. So we have these founding cultures. We have the Indigenous culture, which just makes Canada fun and exciting and interesting and a fascinating history. But it's not like bugs caught in amber. We continue to evolve, right? And I think that's fine. The future, we don't know what it's going to be. But what's happening, if you push certain things faster than a system can tolerate, you may break the system. So we're seeing that right now with mass immigration, uncontrolled immigration. It seems to be the cross-cutting cross-cutting root cause of many problems. Now, it's not the multicultural nature of the immigrants. There's a tendency to blame the immigrants. Now, there's, like any group, there's scoundrels and angels within that mass of people, but there's just too many. It's like water. I mean, you need it to drink, you need it to wash, but you can drown in it. So
that's a good one.
I'll tell you a little story. I mean, I interview candidates, and I talk to a lot of people. I talked to a fellow. He's very active in the Muslim community in Northern Ontario, and he told me about they have charities, and in Islam, charity is one of the 4 pillars of what a good person does. You have to help others. Great, that's Christian value too, by the way, which Christians shouldn't forget. So anyway, a lot of ethnic groups have this, so I'm not singling them out. They have mutual aid groups. They have, like, you're new to the country, it's all alien, it's weird. So they take new arrivals from Muslim countries. They arrive in the winter, they don't know what clothes to wear. So people that are like them will say, hey, we're in Canada now. You got to learn English. Here's where you go. Oh, this is, okay, when you go to the food store, this is what you got to deal with. There's the food you can get. Buy this. Don't buy that. It's too expensive. Or it's, it's haram, watch out, check for the label, whatever. Helping find a house, helping find a sense of community, a little bit of perhaps counseling, all good. You know why? Because it's not the government. It's customized to the customer. You know what I heard from this guy? I said, my God, Jack Trudeau, he's flooding the country with new arrivals. He's destroying our ability to help people. We're being overwhelmed by individuals are okay, but there's just too many of them. We can't integrate them. We just don't have enough volunteers. Our volunteers are burning out. What happens? Then some people in some groups will say, well, geez, we can't keep up. We need a government grant. Round and round you go. In the midst of all this, it grows the government, drives up housing. Our unemployment is high right now, and we're flooding people into an economy that might not be able to accommodate them. There's so many problems. So there's so many unintended consequences it's a combination of virtual signaling and perhaps neglect, but just flooding people in. And then the argument you hear is our economy needs it. We need workers. Well, if you're running a Ponzi scheme, yeah, you need new suckers.
That's okay. You can
That's what's happening. That's what's happening now.
I have a question, Stephen, to tie together a couple of things you said. So okay. My general question is, what is immigration, or what is the purpose of immigration? But let me add some backstory. In 2023, we brought in 450,000. We brought in 1.25 million people, and we gave citizenship to 450,000 of those. Mm-hmm. 1.25 million, that's about 3.5% of the population. For 450,000, let's say, that's like 1% of the population. What is it that we're doing wrong that we need those levels of immigration? Or alternatively, is this how every country on the planet since time immemorial has worked? And
no.
Natural growth be damned.
We don't need that much immigration. There are valid reasons for immigration, like companies may need to move people around between divisions. There may be compassionate, there are, I think, some reasons that are valid to help actual refugees, like read the PPC platform, like people who are subjected to horrible discrimination, like, say, sexual minorities in Muslim countries, or sects within sects that are being raped and killed for no reason. We want to help those people. War refugees, there are, refugeeism used to be giving people temporary shelter so that they don't get killed and they can wait for whatever went wrong in their home country and then go back. We've forgotten about the go back part. So when you talk refugees, you got to be careful. What's a real refugee versus just somebody saying they are? And you bring up a great point. In the immigration question, the numbers have often been about, permanent residents and immigrants going through the immigration process. But until recently, there was not much attention towards temporary foreign workers and student visas. We were talking about immigration, and I think you brought up a great point in that people talk a lot about, say, the immigrant path of permanent residency and the numbers there and the hundreds of thousands, but until recently, not enough attention was given to the vast flood of temporary foreign workers and also student visas. And, a lot of students that come from places that it's a bit of a racket there too, that the way we fund post-secondary schools and try to subsidize and control tuition, it creates a situation where as businesses, universities need more. They know they can milk foreign students for way more money, so it's kind of driving something. So you asked, why do we need immigration? Well, we hardly need any immigration. The argument you hear is our economy needs it. We need those suckers to fill the Ponzi scheme, to pay the taxes to give boomers their health care. Well, immigrants age too. You're just kicking the can down the road. And I'll always say Canada used to work great with a much smaller population. Like around when I was born, there was way less people, and obviously the country worked. The country doesn't need way more people. This idea of 100 million Canadians is just insane. I don't think we owe anybody anything. Now, individuals might want to help their family, but that's not the government's job. And the only thing that needs tons more people is our huge welfare state. That's the one that needs more people. Economy doesn't really need more people. I mean, we have unemployment. It's pretty high right now. I just saw it come in the news today. I saw it like 7% in some places. So pumping more people in where even the ones already here aren't integrating, like, come on. So at the Revision Conference in August in Gatineau, Maxime's speech, he announced that we support a complete moratorium on immigration until things stabilize. Because our housing situation isn't keeping up, our public services aren't keeping up, our infrastructure isn't keeping up. And then finally, there are cultural costs to bringing people in from very different cultures. Are they assimilating? And I'd say no. We're seeing establishment of, I won't use the word ghetto, but high concentrations of mono-ethnic communities. Is this being done because that's what people really, really want? Or is this happening because that's just when you're a fish out of water, you want to go to where you're comfortable and are with people who speak your language and do, where you don't feel excluded. And when people say the word assimilation, it has some perhaps negative connotations, but I like the term maybe integration a bit better. But you're new to Canada. We want you to fit in. We want you to become a Canadian. We want that you feel part of it. But what I'm seeing is the people that are physically here, I don't think they feel part of it. And I think the ability to assimilate and integrate, this is a social thing. It's a human thing. It takes time. It takes love and care and community. And I don't believe that a person coming here and just integrating in a neighborhood with people just like them is what's good for Canada or it's what's good for them. I want to see if a person comes to Canada, like in the past, they end up in a smaller town, or they end up in the boonies, or they become a lumberjack or a miner, as over the years has occurred. I mean, we've had immigration for hundreds of years, and, well, what's left and what's working, there's a lot of examples of successful integration, like out west, lots of, specifically you mentioned Ukrainians. They fit in right well. You didn't hear, too much about Eastern Europeans causing trouble and ruining neighborhoods or anything like that. Maybe the Doukhobors were a funny story, but even that kind of blew over. Oh well, piece of history, let's move on. And you got all kinds of weird last names in Canada, including my own, and I don't think anyone has a problem with it. And so it's a question of quantity. And I used to argue with Max a lot about, he used to have the number 150K. I said, yeah, I mean, less is better, but to me it's more important that we control the quality of immigrants. Like, our point system's pretty good if it were to be followed. I mean, when Donald Trump proposed a similar immigration system in the US as to what Canada has, they called him a racist. I've faced that. I've tried to hire engineers from abroad, and I couldn't get them to qualify because of age or language or something, yet people barge in and end up living on the street, and it's those other paths that are a problem, and we should close those paths. And, and as Max has explained a lot, family reunification, there's way too much of that. The immigrants that come in should serve a purpose to Canada and to increase Canadian productivity. And bringing grandma and great uncle along is not doing that. We need to cut back on that because our social services are strained already. That's half the stuff you hear online is wait times and healthcare stuff, and I can't get attention at the office. So now that said, private sponsorship, great. If you want to bring someone here and you cover all their costs and you're legally on the hook for it, I could see that. I could see that. I don't have a problem with that. Just don't make me pay for the other guy's family to come over. I have enough things to do and pay for.
I had a question about the rate of growth. I've been here since the 90s, and in the early 90s, like Canada was a much more livable place. Like you could stretch out without hitting someone. Now they've brought in, let's say the population's doubled, but the infrastructure hasn't doubled. We don't have twice as many highways. We don't have twice as many roads. The roads aren't being maintained. Do you agree or disagree that there's a disconnect between the amount of people we're bringing in and the infrastructure investment in the country?
I agree. Mass immigration is straining our infrastructure. And the characteristic of the particular kinds of immigrants we're getting, they're all ending up in Greater Toronto and Greater Vancouver. So if immigration were more widely distributed, there would be less of an infrastructure strain. But due to the way our country's, division of powers and taxation works, cities end up just bursting to the seams. So I agree. Yes, this is another way. This is another place where mass immigration is a root cause of all kinds of problems. I mean, maintaining infrastructure and building infrastructure is a challenge as it is, and mass immigration is making everything harder. Absolutely.
There's another thing that was brought to my attention from members in my riding. Canada is technically not as big as people think, because they look at the country, they say it's the second biggest country who can take in unlimited immigrants, but apparently 90% of the population lives on 1% of the land, and it's not just the 100-mile stretch to the border. It's literally Vancouver area, and I guess the Great Lakes area, so Toronto and Montreal.
Yeah.
So do you think there's a problem where Canada is almost like the size of the United Kingdom?
Yeah, it's a problem. People, if you don't live here, you see this big empty place, and the Mercator projection makes it look even fatter than it is. And I say to Americans, could you imagine if you had only one east-west interstate? Well, that's Canada. We're a thin ribbon, mostly. And yeah, you're right. It's overly concentrated. There is no attempt that I'm aware of to distribute immigrants more evenly throughout the country. And yeah, a lot of our land is crown land that's full of trees and swamp and mosquitoes, and there's a lot of agricultural land, and that is not land that supports high density people. Now, I'm not against certain kinds of densification. Like I think that humans naturally are psychologically best living in reasonably small communities. I mean, most of our history has been small tribes and small towns, and I'm not for 15-minute cities, which are basically some kind of urbanist thing. But I have no problem with, say, in a rural area, having some apartment buildings in a town so that rural workers have a place to live and can afford it. And urban sprawl, there's problems with that too. I mean, look in southern Ontario, it just keeps going and going, and McMansions everywhere. If you can afford a nice house, go for it. But that's not the only answer, especially if you're paving over the best farmland in our climate. We got to be a little bit careful. But yeah, I agree. We are. I don't know what population level we can sustain, but I certainly think that just pumping in more people is not going to make things better. Maybe there's some kind of very sort of, I don't know, left wing or super compassionate urge to solve all the problems of the world and let all the downtrodden masses come here out of some compassionate thing, but it's certainly not something the country needs. Let's ask the question, why aren't 20-somethings forming families? Why aren't young people having kids? Like, let's ask the question. And I think that growing population through the very well proven and established little communist cell called a family, that has worked. Why isn't it working? And to say that, oh, we're bringing in immigrants because people aren't having families and we're not hitting replacement rate. Did we ever consider that this mass immigration is driving things in a direction that is making young people give up? Maybe not directly, but indirectly, making it hard to settle down, start a family. Like, let's look at that. I know in Quebec they talk about that a bit. They have the stronger impetus of trying to preserve their culture. But I'm going, let's preserve the broader culture of Western nuclear family, small communities that work together. By the way, that's got nothing to do with race or ethnicity. It's a way of humans living together. Why are we seeing this shift? There's a lot of reasons. I mean, I'd say that modern online technology and stuff is messing with people's heads, but also mass immigration is making things worse. Oh, well, then that goes all the way to the question of globalization. What has globalization done to us? Our people, we're not making stuff anymore. We outsourced all of that to somewhere else so we can buy cheap stuff on the shoulders of workers who are abused. We don't like to abuse our workers there, but boy, we love to buy stuff from places that do abuse them. And now we're seeing the price being paid, again, unforeseen consequences. So let's tie in this mass immigration to globalization. Wasn't globalization supposed to uplift the people in the third world and other countries? Did it? Why are they all flocking here? Because it didn't work. And what we need to do is build Canada and stop this nonsense of trying to build up other countries. And I totally with the PPC platform of we don't need to do foreign aid. There's very limited cases where that makes sense. So let's stop that nonsense and let's start getting out of the way of Canadians so they can get going with their careers and build families and be able to afford a place to live. I mean, it took us 60 years to get into the mess we're in, this great huge Jenga tower of programs and policies and bureaucracies. I mean, we're not going to be, I mean, I sometimes fantasize about getting a chainsaw and campaigning like Javier Milei, but maybe there's a more Canadian way of fixing what's wrong.
You could get a plaid lumberjack and go with an axe. You could do that.
Yeah, I'm a lumberjack, and I'm okay. We're all going to live free. So, absolutely. So, I mean, I personally, I'm very much encouraging a harsher platform about government sprawl. We need to start talking about what departments, what ministries, what programs need to be eliminated. Sorry, kids, we need a grown-up conversation about this. And I'll tell you what, the Conservatives aren't. They're avoiding that conversation. Poilievre is pandering to this mass immigrant thing. He's avoiding the tough questions, and he's scared to death of the media. He wants to remain in their good books, so he's not going to say stuff that doesn't fit the narrative. I mean, the guy's a dancer. I mean, he's a good brawler in question period, maybe. I think his wardrobe makeover to look like some kind of nerdy Fonzie didn't work. And well, this election gets closer, they start to finally figure out what policies might make sense. But it's all slogans and brand loyalty at this point. I find it's hard to convert conservatives to PPC right now. They're on a bit of a sugar high. They're all horny for power, and people have real high hopes. And well, if they do win, we'll unfortunately have to feed on the disappointment. But that seems to be where it's going right now. And nobody wants to hear about, you can get rid of Trudeau. That's great. We should do it. But if you don't replace him with something better, you haven't achieved anything other than maybe some kind of a feeling of, I don't know what, revenge. But I think that we need to actually change how government works, not just what color a tie and how flamboyant the socks are. I'm not seeing it. And it's frustrating for a lot of people in Canada to say, I don't support the Liberals or the Conservatives. They think you're nuts. It's like being in the U.S. and are you a Democrat or Republican? And there's no other option. This, unfortunately, is where our first-past-the-post system ends up. By the way, I'm a big advocate for electoral reform, and I think that's something we need.
I wanted to go back to something you said. I think you said it in this episode, but we talked about it before the episode. You said it is the welfare state or the size of government that's driving immigration.
Yes.
So let's focus on a concrete example, the Canada Pension Plan. Many people have called it a Ponzi scheme in the sense that you need ever-expanding base of new investors to pay out the old investors. Typically, I guess the idea at the time was that the natural birth rate would grow the population, but that didn't happen, as you mentioned. So is this a case of immigration being a consequence of bad, big government policy?
Well, it could be. I mean, the belief that we need lots of immigration, the argument that it's to support the economy, I don't buy it. But the welfare state, as it is, which has ever expanded, and the bureaucracy, they do need fuel. And the only thing in Canada that would need lots more suckers is the welfare state. And we're at a point, well, the other thing is with investment funds too, is that when interest rates are low, the funds aren't growing. And so that's another strain on it. That's a whole more complicated thing, and I'm not an economist or actuary. But a lot of people don't understand that the pension system, Canada Pension Plan, is really a mass transfer of wealth from the young to the old. And in a growing, thriving economy, and the goal of avoiding destitution of the aged is a valid one. It's a good one. But most of the money is a flow-through. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but I heard something like 20-something% is actually coming out of investments. The rest is just a transfer. So, yeah, I mean, the demographic shape will affect our ability to pay. And most people believe that there's an implicit guarantee by the government to, say, prop up any pension shortfalls. I mean, the arguments I've heard is that the pensions are, the government pensions are basically well invested, I guess. I don't have any proof one way or the other. But yeah, the only thing that needs more bodies is the welfare state. The state itself, the economy itself has worked smaller. It could work smaller again. And as in our policy book, it's not how big your economy is. It's how rich the people within it are. We don't need, the size of the economy doesn't really tell you what the quality of life of the people within it, because you have to look at economic opportunity and ability to avoid abject poverty. I mean, there's lots of big economies in the world where people live poorly, and then there's some smaller economies where people live quite well. Let's say like Norway. It's not a huge place. It hasn't got a huge population. They have natural resources, and they've handled some of their sovereign wealth very well. Canada could do the same. But right now, our governments seem to be anti-resource, anti-prosperity, talking about, hurting our quality of life from many directions, climate panic and all that. But yeah, I mean, I don't buy that you need to bring in lots of people. You bring them in, and it depends. Are they going to be net contributors, or are they going to live on the street and require social aid? Well, what are we seeing right now? We see refugees put up in hotels. We see a lot of money being spent. The cities, complaining about why the feds foist all this trouble on us, send us more money. If we didn't bring in this mass flood, a lot of these problems that are pulling at the state coffers would go away. So, yeah, it's a multi-dimensional problem, but I strongly advocate for let's close this off and send away people that aren't contributing for sure, and stop more from coming in. And again, it's easy to generalize to say all immigrants are like that or all refugees are like that. No, they're not all the same, but there's just too many of them.
I always tell people, to the government, not to me, not to good people, but to the government, immigrants aren't people. They're like a dollar value on a spreadsheet.
Yep.
And their aim is financial in bringing in these immigrants. You want to bring in more money than they take out or you spend on them. Mm-hmm. But it feels like the government's spending more on them, like they're subsidizing the salaries of temporary foreign workers. You mentioned they're putting them up in hotels.
Yeah.
So is this just, did they make a mistake, or are they, this can't be intentional, right?
Some of it's intentional. A lot of it's a mistake. My tendency is to not attribute malice where incompetence is the thing. And I think that progressives have this strange way of believing that if your intentions are nice and kind and compassionate, that anything goes and money doesn't matter. So that may be driving some of it, to appear to be compassionate, to appear to be globalist, to appear to be friendly, but reality is not so friendly. And the reality for a lot of recent immigrants is not a happy story. For many of them, a dream has turned into a nightmare. And I blame the government. I don't blame the immigrants. We have to stop this. And I don't buy it for a minute that we need all this replacement. Like, we seriously have to start cutting some spending, regardless of what our population is. I mean, something's gone terribly wrong. Like, for example, the civil service grew by 47% since Trudeau started, yet the population only grew like 14 point something. Like, what's going on? With modern technology, the ratio of civil servants to population should be getting much, much lower. Why? And then it's not just direct employees of the government. Like, the government is subsidizing so many agencies and councils and UN programs to harass our municipalities into adopting all kinds of dumb programs. The boundary between the citizens and the blob of government is kind of indistinct. And again, we've circled back to multiculturalism. There's a lot of money flow, a lot of pandering, and it's a lot of vote buying. Because a lot of the mainstream parties have a very paternalistic view of immigrants, especially those of different ethnicities. They see them as juicy, big, easy to grab voting blocks. You go to some weird-looking building, put on a silly hat, talk to a community representative, and you got 4,000 loyal people there. They're going to vote the way you convince the leader to tell them to vote. That's an ugly thing in my mind, because, they're not viewing immigrants as individuals, as sovereign humans. They're viewing them as statistics and groups and cartoon character stereotypes of identity. I don't want to ever be viewed that way. I don't want to view other people that way, but that's what our government is doing, and this has to end.
Did you see that campaign flyer from some NDP politician? I don't know what writing, but they had the Palestinian flag in the background, and it said something like, "Free Gaza" in the, the foreground. So that's on the topic of pandering. Did you see that?
No, I haven't, but yeah, I mean, unions and woke leftists, they're really big on this whole Gaza thing. I don't know what. Well, I don't even know who they're pandering to. I don't think they're pandering to Palestinians because there aren't really that many in Canada. I think they're pandering to white middle class self-appointed saviors of the world. That's who they're really pandering to, and I don't like it one bit. I think that well, those are not Canadian issues. So why are Canadian federal parties getting into that, other than maybe asking the question of are we funding this violence? I understand Canada's sending money to both sides of many conflicts, and I haven't seen a lot of peacekeeping in a long time, and our military is being starved of funds and being demoralized by the imposition of strange social programs on them. Yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff going on. To me, though, these foreign flags aren't like red cloth to a bull or anything. I try to avoid getting distracted or too angry about it. I do support the right of Canadians to support foreign political causes or charitable causes. Absolutely, go for it, but it's not the government's business. Like, it should be legal for a person to donate to charities, humanitarian causes around the world, but it is not right for our government to forcibly take money from me and send it to causes I don't support. I think governments should be as neutral as possible about stuff. We do humanitarian stuff, and yes, we should support democracy and freedom around the world, but I don't think that we can possibly support the quality of life of people in other parts of the world until we can see that their governments and structures and societies are capable of thriving. And yeah, I'm a Western chauvinist. If you don't have rule of law, you don't have democracy, you don't have rights for women, I'm not sending money to you. Because if I wouldn't support it here in Canada, why the hell would I support it somewhere else? At least in Canada, there's some visibility of what goes on, but a lot of foreign aid right now is taking money from poor people in rich countries and giving it to rich people in poor countries, and I see these conflicts and challenges aren't really getting any better. So the right answer sometimes is cut it off, let nature take its course, concentrate on making Canada a good place for Canadians to live, and trust that others are like us and will take care of their own stuff. I'm not an isolationist. I believe in cooperating and trading with countries that play fair and have stuff that we need or want to buy stuff that we have. Hey, I'm all for it. But again, as a libertarian, I remember that countries don't trade. People trade. Companies trade. Governments just put rules around it to slow it down or get in its way. But unless you're talking about a totalitarian state, there's really not a whole lot that countries buy. It's people and businesses. So I'm all for buying and selling stuff, but you got to play fair. You got to treat your workers like, maybe not as well as in Canada, but you can't be, enslaving people, making them work just so we can buy cheap crap at Walmart. So I know I've been rambling a bit, but I think that being Canada first, there's nothing wrong with that. And because we're a multi-ethnic, multicultural country, as I said, that's an output, not an input. There's nothing wrong with being Canada first. It's not racist to say that. I think it's basically taking care of your own and viewing your co-citizens as family. And I'm all for borders. I mean, yeah, real hardcore libertarians want open borders, but they also don't. don't want a welfare state. So you can have a welfare state or you can have open borders. You can't have both. Look at England. Holy crap. Do you want that happening here? I don't. And that's why we have to stop this mass migration. Because if it keeps going and the natives, that's the people born here already living here, and the newcomers are not integrating and they're forming camps, you're going to get violence eventually. And we don't want to get anywhere near that in our peaceable dominion here. So let's look at what's happening in England, what's happening in Europe right now, and learn from it. And there you can see mass uncontrolled immigration of people, largely male, largely from a very different culture, huge numbers, leads to strife. And we need to be very, very careful here.
Stephen, in finishing up the episode, I always like to ask the guests to give a message of hope, optimism, something positive for Canadians. So what would be your message to the audience?
Well, I think I really get angry when somebody says Canada's broken. And when somebody says we Canadians, especially a politician, you can go into a really dark place if you make the mistake of equating Canada with its government. That's the arrogance of mainstream politicians. They say they speak for Canada. They say that if our government and bureaucracy is malfunctioning, that the country's broken. The country's fine. Canadians are good people. All we have to do is find ways to help people regain their confidence in themselves. And this, I think, is just generally good. You don't want people in despair. And what I'm telling people is, you are okay. You can make it. If you can put in an honest 8 hours of work a day in Canada, you might not get rich, but you're going to get along. You're going to do fine. And Canada's a beautiful place. Canada's full of good people. If we can reestablish the bonds of community and learn to not wait for the government to save us, look at our history. That's what people have pulled themselves up by the bootstraps in this country. Let's get back our sort of pioneer mentality. And I think the future, as globalism decreases, as the U.S. Navy is doing less to protect the trade around the world, I think North America is going to become a powerful regional bloc with a powerful economy. We're going to manufacturing's coming back. We've got the resources. We've got the rule of law. I see the future as bright. I think this century is Canada's. We just have to fix the government. And I tell people who are black-pilled, who have given up on voting, who say it doesn't matter, well, I feel sorry for you because, the PPC is offering a political solution to what's wrong with a lot of things. We're the mechanics that can go to Ottawa, fix what's broken, jettison the stuff that's not needed, and we'll pump that septic tank. It's not a swamp. It's full of waste, and it's all made by humans. And there's 40 million Canadians now. There's 40 million ways to be a good Canadian. And it's not the job of government to tell you what that is. It's not the job of the CBC to tell you what that is. You already know that. And you talk to your family, you talk to your neighbors. We can be a community. I see a lot of positive potential. I see continuing friendliness towards the PPC. Well, I'm in the party. I want us to thrive. But in the first time, ever, I go down the street in my neighborhood and I have people talking to me and asking, oh, what's the PPC view on this? What's the PPC view on that? These people had never talked to me before. I know Canadians are shopping around for something better because they have a hunch that it ain't going right. And just sticking with loyalty to the team colors that you and your parents have always stuck to doesn't mean anything. it's a mirage. If people would just be open-minded, we can get to a place where every Canadian is confident that they can be the agent of their own prosperity. And that requires individuals that are going to say, I can do it. And you know what? It's mind over matter. It's like cognitive behavioral therapy. Start to believe in yourself. Only then can a party like the PPC go do what's necessary, and that is to prune back, push government back, to create the room that you, the citizen, can move forward. I see indications of civic engagement like never before, and I encourage Canadians, let's build our civil society. Yeah, I can tell that you're disillusioned with government, a lot of people out there. And if you look at Buchanan's public choice theory, I get it. From a marketing standpoint, I get it. But emotionally, something's telling me that that's not all there is to it. And the answer is, government isn't your savior. If you're a Christian, there's a different guy that's your savior. And I think that if you build your civil stuff, join your local club, volunteer in your community, go to a municipal council meeting and hear what they're talking about. Well, you're going to be shocked of what they're talking about, what they're not talking about. Get involved. Get involved. And vote PPC, because voting PPC is a vote for yourself. In other words, you're empowering yourself and disempowering ever increasing, burdensome, inefficient, and authoritarian government. Hey, you're okay. The things that have gone wrong in your life are a lot of bad government policy. As a friend of mine said, like our public discourse is wearing the flayed hide of former compassionate progressivism, but the monster inside is not your friend. So the only way out of this is take charge of your own life, cooperate with people, don't hate, don't divide, because that's what they're trying to make us do. So don't fall for it. Just be yourself, be kind, and get involved in your community. I don't know if that's a vision of hope, but I think the answer is already there. It's inside of you. Just don't watch TV so much. That's the other piece of advice. Don't watch stupid meat. I don't watch any major network TV. And you know what? Get outside. Go into the Canadian wilderness. Touch grass. Go to the Canadian Shield. Go to the mountains. Let Canada talk to you.
Stephen, one final question. Where can people go to follow you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm on Twitter. You can find me by searching my name. I'm on Facebook. There's a few videos of some of my speeches on YouTube. Search by my name. And PPC Simcoe North.ca is my local campaign website, and then ppcbarrysimcoe.ca is the regional association. I don't create a lot of content, but I'm out there. You can find me, and as a regional coordinator, if you're in Ontario and you're a candidate or want to volunteer or want to become a candidate, get in touch with me. It's Makk, M-A-K-K, at peoplespartyofcanada.ca. I'd love to talk politics. I'd love to talk how to make the PPC better. And I hope to speak with you again. When I swing by the West Coast, I'll want to drop by. I hear a lot of good things about the Vancouver region PPC. All I hear from HQ is those guys have their act together. So I'm sure you've contributed to that. And I'd like to come over and learn what you guys are doing, especially outreach to frustrated people in your area, and see how we can learn to listen and learn to implement some stuff.
Sure thing. Next time you're over here, we'll go out for a beer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's do it.
Stephen, I'm going to hold you over until after the episode, but I wanted to thank you very much for coming on.
Hey, it's a pleasure. Let's do it again.
Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.